Hey, fantastic. Hi, everybody. Anybody there? Sif, please?
I'm here.
Okay, fantastic. So we're going to start talking about color theory. And I'd just like to start with introducing myself, um, even though, Sif, you definitely know who I am. I'm Dr. Jonathan Benson. I'm also Sir Nexus Pro in the game. And I do a lot of art stuff. So I am looking to basically educate people about the whole color theory and how it works and how we can use that to basically create. So to begin that, you may have acrylic or oils or watercolor or gouache or whatever in front of you, and maybe you don't. But no matter what, I'm going to go and jump right into this, and we'll go from there. So I think most of us in school have probably learned the whole mnemonic, which is Roy G. Biv, which is red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. Um, and they are a part of something called the color wheel. Um, and so when we create that, it's not just um, this roundabout method of just showing the colors, but it also has potential for showing the difference between mixing those colors. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the
Hey, Nexus, we appear to have lost your audio.
Oh, okay. All right.
Now you're back. You're back now.
Okay, fantastic. All right, so here I have this little circle filled with everything, and we have the cardinal points here, and then the other points here and there. So to begin with, we have to go through all of the colors. Now, a lot of times we sort of drop out indigo because it's actually a very hard color to perceive and actually duplicate. So today, what I'm using is actually oil colors. Um, and you'll see here that this palette that I have, let's get the water off of that. It used to be clear. And the reason that it's not clear anymore is because I brushed it on the other side to be gray. And the reasoning behind that will become very apparent when we start to actually mix colors. You see, the problem with it is you have a clear palette and you put it on any surface, you're automatically trying to mix a paint for any particular color, but you're being influenced by that color. So for example, if this were clear, you'd be influenced by the color of this table. Now, if I had painted white underneath this, well, that would be fine at first, but also white will influence the colors that you're trying to mix because you will always try to go lighter based on the fact that it is white. If I'd done a black surface behind it, it would be the same thing. You would also mix your colors, but you had a tendency to go blacker because the last, the behind color is black. So you'll find that a lot of artists definitely oil paints, which I'm actually using today. But when you're using oil paints, what you want is really you want something called a glass palette, which is usually a big square. and it's completely made out of glass, and it has tape around the outside, and then the back part of it is actually colored gray. And the reason that we use gray is because when we're trying to mix the colors, it is much easier for us to get to the true color of something when we are in the neutral zone. So if you are truly trying to paint something and you really want to use a palette, the best thing for you to do is to actually spray paint or whatever have you, the back part of that palette gray, so that you have a better chance of actually achieving the color that you'd like to. Now, I'd like to point out, by the way, that during this exercise, if anybody wants to shout out any questions, please do so. You know, I can certainly stop whenever, and we can talk about differences and paints and so on and so forth. Okay, so we're going to go back here to the color wheel. And just like when we learned in you know, elementary school, the first color we're going to start with is red. And then we're going to go over here to orange. Skip to yellow. And then we're going to go here to green. And then we're going to go to blue here. And then finally up to this other point where we're going to go violet, and we'll go ahead and say purple. Now, when we're talking about all of the different colors here, we have our main colors, but we also have different different mixtures of those colors. So, for example, in this little wedge right here, we might have purple, and then, excuse me, red. And then in this one, we might have red, purple. And now when we're looking at that, a lot of people might be like, oh, what's the difference between blue, green, and green, blue? Well, it's because the first color in that name means that it has more of that, usually more than 60 to maybe 75% of that color versus the other color that is actually mixed with. So, for example, there's a very big difference between, you know, red orange and orange red. And if you were to mix it up and actually do those different quantities, you would notice right off the block that yes, there is a very distinct difference. So at right here for red and orange, we're going to do red, orange. And here we're going to do red, orange. And actually between these two, we usually don't have a primary name between the two, but it slowly turns between red, orange to orange, red. So the thing that's great about the color wheel is that it gives us a lot of direction for many different things. So for example, if you were trying to create something that was black and you were using primarily red, you would notice that when you add green to it, it's going to slowly produce a brown. But the more that you actually add those things, it's actually going to start to slowly evolve into black. Now, a lot of people, when they actually start to try painting, they do black. and they don't realize that when they use black as a pure pigment, that's actually not correct. Pure black, or factory black, as we usually call it, does not really exist in nature. So anything that actually has a black coating on it is really a mixture of a lot of different pigments. One of the ways that we can, test this is if, for example, you see a thing that is primarily black. So let's think about here, this gamsol right there, and we look at the cap there. Now it does look black, absolutely. But if you really, really look into it, you may notice that there are a few things that are reflecting off of it. So if you look at the reflections, and you look at the highlights of it, you will also notice that there's a blue tint to it. And what this tells us is that this is actually a blue black that we're working with. So when you go in, you can still use factory black. You can still use that on your palette. But what you're going to want to do is actually add, a blue or a purple to change the value of that particular color. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to turn on over, and I'm going to bring you over to here. I did a little drawing here. This is a Vive la France. This is Monsieur Baguette. And he doesn't care, and he is giving you the finger. Anyway, the reason that I'm showing you this is that I have sort of come up with my own little mnemonic for the way that colors work. And I make this sort of fake story about how there was a General Roxoboro Huchitosha, and he decided to leave his army because he had this huge revelation about color theory. And it's, of course, completely incorrect, but I have these underlined because Huchitosha, if you can remember that, you can also remember the way that colors work. So I'm going to flip it over now, and we're going to take a look at it. Okay, so hues. Hues are any of these colors around the outside that are mixing together. They could be orange, orange red, yellow green, green blue, blue green, whatever it happens to be. But those are all hues. So these are all basically pure colors. Now to add to that, so hue T, tints. So a tint is any hue that you mix a white into. So for example, a lot of pastel colors can be actually labeled as a tint of a color. A pastel green is actually a hue of green. Pastel yellow is a hue of yellow. Whatever it happens to be, they are still there. Tones. So tones are any particular hue that's actually been mixed with an even black, or an even mixture of black and white. So they create a gray. And when that happens, a tint, or a hue, can actually turn into a tone. So here's the hue, and then this is the tone. You'll notice that, yes, definitely this is a certain type of orange, but it also has a gray background to it. So it gives it an almost like burnt appeal to it. So we have hu, ti, to, and then finally sha, shades. So this is any hue here that has been mixed with black. So if, for example, we have here the yellow, and we mix it all the way with black, just a little bit, we get this little triangle here. As a side note, this is actually called landscape black, or also landscape green. And this is when we're doing landscapes, we usually start with this particular color. And it really gives vibrancy and it really gives depths to a lot of the landscapes that we might try doing. So, so here we have the color wheel. And again, we're going to go over it again. So we're going to do hues. Hues are on the outside. So we have red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. And then we have all the different colors between them, all the mixtures of these pure colors. And then finally, we move down to the tints, which add white, the tones that add a gray, and then finally the shades that add a black. So as long as you understand color theory, you should be able to actually create any color that you want. However, as a caveat, I'm going to go ahead and say that there's a very big difference from paint to paint. So I'm going to bring over one different kind of paint here. I'm using oils today. All right, so this is Gamblin 1980 in alizarin crimson. This is an incredibly nice brand. It's a pretty expensive brand. And a lot of times the difference in the actual cost is because of the amount of pigment that's actually in it. And now this is what's hard for a lot of people, because if I have an expensive bottle of alizarin crimson and I have a really cheap bottle of alizarin crimson, they technically have the same color. And when you look at them and you sort of squint a bit, yes, they do definitely have the same color. However, when you're using alizarin crimson, one of the things that you want to look at is, you know, whatever particular company you're using, the more that you pay, the more pigment that you're going to get in your paints. And, you know, this is definitely in the area of that phrase, you know, you get what you pay for, because these better brands here, they put a lot more pigment into the paint. And that requires a lot of work, a lot of grinding of these pigments into the paint, and also the sheer cost of them. Because, for example, titanium white is actually not that expensive to produce. So you can get a good titanium white from a very, 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 like, you know, highly renowned company for not that much. But at the same time, if you go to a cadmium yellow or a ultramarine blue, that's completely different, because the chemicals that are used to create that particular paint are very expensive. And so the more that you go up in price, the more pigment that you're going to get. So anyway, with that being said, what I'd like to do is go ahead and sort of try to produce a color wheel here. And then also, I've picked a few colors from the Pantone wheel, and I'd like to show you my particular process for how I go about trying to match a color. And hopefully this will be helpful to you guys in the long run. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to start with a red. Now, I went ahead and I started to do this with oil paints because I feel like it's going to give me a greater opportunity to actually mix things. So I'm going to start with some gambasol. This is actually a thinner for oil paints. I'm going to go over here, and then I'm going to actually pick up some of this. We're going to go right over here. I'm just going to put it right here on this. Okay. I'll go back in over here. Pop up and down, up and down. And, you know, there's definitely a whole lot I could say about oil painting and why I'm doing this, but I'm not going to talk about it right now just because it isn't really relevant to what we're doing at the moment. Okay, so this is relatively clean. So I'm going to go right over now. I'm going to pick up some yellow. Okay, so we're going to go right here. Go in with that gambasol. Okay, and we are here now at the yellow mark. Okay, so there we go. So we got red, and then we're going to go orange, yellow, and we're going to green, and then blue. Okay, so I'm going to go back here to the gambasol. Pop up and down, up and down, up and down. And the great thing about this little well right here is that basically all of the particles, the heavy metal particles, are going to go straight down to the bottom, and it has this lovely little sort of sponge at the bottom that's going to completely fill up with all of that stuff, and then I can go in and grab it without worrying about, you know, any differences in color. Okay, so we're going to go now to blue, and I'm going to go ahead and pick up ultramarine. You get what you want. And a lot of that has to do with the amount of pigment in the actual paint. So you can actually go to like maybe Joanne Fabrics or something. You go and you buy like the apple barrel paint that says, you know, cadmium yellow or whatever. And these paint companies, they are still operating.
In Nexus, I think we may have lost your audio again. Yeah.
Hear me?
Yep, I hear you now.
Okay, great. Can you tell me what the last thing I was saying?
I wasn't paying super close attention. Maybe one of the other participants can. I just noticed it had gone silent.
Last thing I remember hearing, you were talking about the apple bottom cadmium yellow from Joanne.
Okay, yeah, okay, great, thank you. So when we're talking about different paint companies, there's like the Apple Barrel, which you can get, and it's super cheap. You can also get, for example, Gamblin, which actually has honey in the recipe, and you can go beyond that. But all of the different colors that are actually shown are, each company tries to actually match it to the color in terms of Pantone. So you might get an apple barrel that says cadmium yellow on it. You might also use the cadmium yellow that I just used. And they are technically the same color. However, in terms of vibrancy, they are different. So when your eye sees a color, it's definitely, everything is being reflected back to you within like a cadmium yellow sort of thing. So if you use apple barrel or folk art or whatever, that's the same color that's being brought back to you as, say, a Gamblin cadmium yellow. It's the same thing. However, your eyes are going to perceive it differently merely because of the intensity of the pigments that are actually in the paint. So if you're using really, really cheap paint, yes, you can create absolutely a very beautiful image. But if you're really trying to create a beautiful image that also celebrates all of vibrancy and all of the different, tones of color, then absolutely you should go with something that's a bit more expensive. But it also depends on, also how dedicated you are to the craft. If you're somebody who enjoys painting and, likes to do it, but at the same time doesn't want to do it on like a professional level or a student level, then yeah, go ahead. Do the apple barrel or the fork art or the deco art or whatever. But very seriously, if you are looking to actually work with subjects and create beautiful art that also is very lifelike and that has a real bearing on our realistic world, then yes, absolutely, you should go with the better paint because it has much more pigment to it. So I have these different colors here. And I also do have, that's one of the things. I'm actually going to stop because I want to talk about vibrancy again. So if we look over here at the palette, you'll notice I've got titanium white, I've got cadmium red, I've got vermilion red, I've got alizarin crimson, I've got cadmium yellow, lemon yellow. I've got, what was this? This was Viridian green. I've also have the, was that ultramarine blue and then French ultramarine. Then I also have the burnt sienna. And then finally, I have the burnt umber. So as a side note, all of these different paints that we have right here have a different viscosity to them. They also have a different intensity to them. So that's one thing that you can certainly think about if you're looking at which particular paints you're going to use, because you can actually pick them up at the store and look at the opacity for them. So for example, if I were going to add and I don't have them available, unfortunately, but if I were going to add Mars black to the white, and ivory black to the white, one of them would be incredibly opaque. So it would have a huge amount of power in changing this over to a gray. On the other hand, one would be way less opaque, and so it would have much less power when turning it over to a white. So we'll go back over here, and we're gonna look at, okay, red, and then the ultramarine. So we're gonna mix that up, and we'll put in the purple. Okay, so we're gonna go over here now. We're gonna do purple. Okay, I'm gonna clean my brush a little bit, and then we're gonna go back over here. I should have changed that, but that's okay. Anyway, we're gonna go back down here. We're gonna do the green. The green is right over here. So we're gonna put that in. Okay, beautiful green. Okay, so we got red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, and there we go. All right, so we're gonna go back. And we're gonna create the orange. Now I realize now that I probably completely fucked up my lines, but it doesn't matter. That's fine as long as we get it all together. So I'm gonna create a red and a yellow here. I'm gonna go back. Got red, orange, yellow, green, blue. And then I don't necessarily need to do the mixing for this. But I definitely encourage people to try this color wheel thing. So if you want to go and you want to try and do that, go back to this size.
Your audio is starting to fade again.
Hello,
There it goes.
we good now?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So anyway, if you want to get a better practice of this, I would suggest going back and trying to recreate this circle here and go in, and you're going to want to do the same thing, the hues, the tints, the tones, and the shadows. All right, so we go hu, ti, ton, sha, which was the Japanese general that I completely made up with a history and so on and so forth. But you can totally go on that, or you can just go online and go from that. Anyway, all right, so what I want to do right now is this is a sort of last thing that I'd like to do, is actually I have these Pantone colors that I have printed out. And what I'd like to do is actually try to recreate one of these colors. Any suggestions from anyone?
How about the Niagara?
Niagara. Okay, that's cool. All right, so when we're trying to reproduce a color, we want to ask ourselves a couple questions. So first off, what is the hue? Well, this is obviously blue. All right, we can go back and we can look at that right here. Duncan, Jesus. All right, so we look at that. Okay, Pantone. We got the blue, and this is obviously blue. So that is our hue. Now, if you want to look at tints, is this a hue that has been added white to? Yeah, I would say probably not, but it also depends on the blue that you're using. So if we go back over here, we say that we have the ultramarine blue. Yeah, that's definitely a color that we have added white to. All right, so we know already that this is a blue that has a white tone added to it. Okay, so it has a white added to it, so it makes it a tint. And now if we look at it, we talk about tones. Did we add any gray to the blue to make it softer, to make it more neutral? Now, I think for me, this is a pretty neutral grade of blue. If we look over here at our original, okay, I think that that's definitely true. And then finally, if we look at it and we ask ourselves, between the blue that we have, okay, and the original, and the particular color that we have, is it a shade? Is it a hue plus black? We look over there, if we added black to that, we would be completely out of our element. So let's try to recreate that color and see how well we do. And really, this is all about asking, deductive questions about, where things fall. So if you start in the middle and you ask yourself, is it more blue or is it more green? Is it more red, more orange, so on and so forth? All right, so we're going to start, and I'm going to clean my brush real quick. So obviously we need to start with a blue. All right, so we're going to start with a blue, and we're going to bring it on over here to the middle. Okay, so now seems to be a little bit lighter from that. So I'm going to, and I'm just going to add a little bit of white. A little bit of white right there. And actually that seems just a little too much. I'm going to go ahead and go back here and go right back into that. Okay, we're going here. Right there. Okay, we also same stuff. This was it seems to be a tone. It seems to be a little bit.
And Nexus, your audio cut out again.
Okay. Am I back?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah? You guys can hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, so when we're looking back at that, all right, we did decide that it was a bit of a tint. Okay, it did have a bit of white in it because it was lighter. Now we also decided at the same time that it was also a bit muted, which means that we're going to add some gray to it. So I'm going to go over here to my palette. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of white, just a little bit. And by the way, just before I go with this, my palette right here, you'll notice that it's gray. And the reason that I did that is because when you start off with a palette that, did I already say this?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yes, you did. Okay. All right, cool. Well, then it doesn't matter. But anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to have this white paint right here. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add. All you have to do is take complementary colors. So red, for example, you add it to green, and you get a type of black. Very few things in nature are actually what we call factory black. Every black thing has some sort of, underlying color. So let's go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and do, because this is blue, I'm going to do blue and orange and see what we get. So
Hey, your audio's cut out again. Nexus, your audio is cut out again. Nexus, your audio is cut out again.
I don't know why it does that, but
All right, you appear to be back.
okay. Cool. Some,
You're gone again.
huh?
Your audio is gone again.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, anybody can hear me right now?
Mhm.
Can anyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. All right, so right now what I have is sort of a green, blue, sort of grayish color. And I want to go and look back at the color we're trying to match, which is right over here. If I put that down on it, that is definitely not the color. So clearly we need to add more blue. And over here, which is not terrible, but it's also not light enough, which merely means that we need to bring it down with just a little bit of white. Okay, and then we're going to go back and see what we've got. Okay. So actually, it looks fairly close, but what I can see here is that it's a bit more green than it is blue. But it's also darker, so it looks like we need to add a lighter color and then also more blue. So we're going to add a little bit of a light blue to it, and we should be able to get it right back to where it needs to be. Really, mixing colors like this is is certainly an art. And you have to go back and forth a lot of times to get it exactly where you want it to be. But that's okay. You know, it's not a big deal. It's just a matter of, you know, getting it to a point where you want it to be. Now we're really close. We're very close with this color and the next. And it looks like it just needs a little bit more blue. Leaving that. Now, I'm going to go ahead and say, as a side note, when we're talking about, what was I going to say? Brilliance when it comes to painting, is that sometimes, no matter what you do, you can't necessarily match the exact same color. And that has everything to do with the type of pigment that is there. So sometimes, no matter what you do, for example, ultramarine blue, if you don't have ultramarine blue, but you're trying to match that color, you're never going to be able to, merely because it does not have the correct pigments and the right density for it to actually happen. All right, over here, and clearly I'm having some problems here because it is not working out. Okay, I'll go a little bit here. And we're close, but again, at the same time, it is trial and error. So this here, it needs just a little bit more white and a little bit more blue. Oh, I'll just shade it out right now, but it's a nice color to start with. And again, like, you know, sometimes it is incredibly intuitive and you will start out with the color and you'll know exactly what to do and you'll create it. And sometimes a lot of the colors, it takes a while to actually get to the true color that you need because it's a complicated color. Again, like with this, this vermilion green right here, I wouldn't be able to create this color without very expensive paints, merely because it is so pigmented. The same thing is true for this yellow over here. Well, it's a yellow because I wouldn't even be able to create that. But at the same time, it's hyper pigmented. It's the only thing that I can do to try and create that, if I didn't have it, was either to buy that color or to also buy something that was slightly higher in terms of cost and tone it down for that.
Hey, your audio cut out again.
Still there?
Now you're back.
Okay, cool. Anyway, that was the gist of what I'd like to, what I was wanting to teach today. And I welcome any particular questions. Okay.
All right, looks like audio's cut out again.
Okay, Marcus, can you see me?
Yeah, I can see you, but no, I can hear you now too.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, thank you guys very much for attending the class, and I hope you guys enjoyed it, and hopefully other people will, view the video. But anyway, thank you so much, and I'll see you guys later.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.